My name is Susie Hanson, and I'm from New Zealand. I'm a UFO sighting researcher of 40 years. I'm also an experiencer. I have two websites, one for documenting New Zealand UFO sighting research, which is www.ufocusenz.org.nz, and I also have a website called Communicator Link, where I can be contacted along with some colleagues by other experiencers or abductees who would like to talk about their experiences and discuss them with us. I've written a book called The Dual Soul Connection, The Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, which documents my lifetime of contact experiences, as well as a lot of ET technology, consciousness aspects of the contact phenomenon, and telepathy, etc. So that documents my life of contact up to this point. Dr. Rudi Schuld, who's now a retired astrophysicist from Harvard University, examined all of my material and has contributed to the book by way of footnotes and a scientific epilogue. So I had a recall of something that was quite astonishing in terms of a medical piece of medical technology that I saw some years ago. I've seen several versions of this technology, and I call it a scanning machine, but it is much, much more complex than that. The first time I saw it was when I was a young woman of 28 and I'd just had my first child. I was taken on board a craft and I was actually shown a whole group of children there, babies of various species as well as humans, and they took part in getting to know each other as very, very young children. And as a mother, I was taken off to a hospital wing of the craft where I was examined to see how my physical status was, how my health was. And in doing so, they used this piece of technology, which basically was, to me, looking at it, was a big circle on the ceiling above me. And from the circle came shining down this a beam of light or energy. I'm not sure what it was or whether it was a combination of the two. And where that circle touched my body, I was able to see into my body and see my bones. They would click on a little screen and it would change to ligaments, tendons, or the vascular system. On another occasion, that was 1983, on an earlier occasion in the late 70s, I also saw a handheld version of this, which I again called a scanner, and it was run up and down over the surface of my body, quite close to my body, and I was told by the ET at the time that it was recording and, shall we say, videoing my entire body, and all of the images were being transferred to a computer for analysis and to be put onto a data bank. At that time, I didn't look down at my body. I didn't half sit up on my elbows and look to see what there was. I just knew it as a scanning machine, but I had the advantage of seeing the underside of it as it was being passed up and down my body. And it was about 30 centimetres long, 20 wide, with a handle on it, a dark metallic colour. And what I noticed was the red light emitting from the bottom, which I saw as little squares of red and white light that was emanating from it. I think the most astonishing time for me was when later in life, when my son was actually 12 and we were taken on board a craft together, I was taken to a room where once again the ceiling stationed or mounted technology was used, which created a large circle on my body that could be moved up and down so they could see whatever part of my body they wanted to. And it looks into the body. So they're seeing a real-time version of your veins, vascular system, of your organs pumping and hissing and gurgling, and of your bones, etc. So they can look at any aspect of your physiology. And I can imagine how amazing this would be in today's medical technology if, instead of using invasive surgery today to do, say, an exploratory on the body to see what a problem is if it hasn't shown up in MRI or scans or x-rays, if you could just have this machinery that's able to look into the body in real time and assist a surgeon to see what the problem is and to actually go into the veins and be able to zoom in and see what's right there inside the body. And on that occasion, they ended up looking at my nasal tubes. They were able to go right down into a microscopic form and look inside the tubes to see what the problem was.
Wow. Okay, and I talked to you to get this interview because you had found somebody else that I've already interviewed. Can you go through that, where suddenly this technology seems to have appeared on the market, and then you found another experiencer who had witnessed the same thing as you? Can you go through that revelation?
Yes, when I spoke at the Alien Cosmic Expo last year in 2017 in June, I attended the experiencer meetings, and a gentleman got up and introduced himself. I have permission to name him. It was Steve Boucher. Steve got up and began describing a handheld version of this technology. So I was absolutely stunned, Grant, because for years and years, decades, I have been searching for this kind of corroboration of technology that I have seen. And I have a number of other corroborative pieces of evidence that I'm going to be presenting at the International UFO Congress in a few weeks' time in Phoenix in the States. But hearing Steve describe exactly what I had seen, to the colours, to get right down to the feeling of the little bit of tingling on the skin as the handheld machine was run over the body, and being able to see into the body, see the bones and other structures under the skin and within the body. So this was a really wonderful moment for me. Again, I've found a number of these over the years, but this piece of technology, I hadn't found anyone who had seen it. And really, frankly, I think this kind of very detailed and very specific corroboration by experiencers is in itself a great form of disclosure. Because, you know, Steve and I have talked, we've shared our the times when we saw these, the dates, the years, the documentation that we had at the time, and I have got descriptions of these things that I've on my speech DVDs that I've talked about for years, trying to find someone who's seen the same. So there was no way that either of us could have heard of each other's, you know, technology that we'd seen at the time. And so it's a wonderful corroboration to find another person who's able to describe exactly what I have seen.
In your discussions with Steve, do you think it was the same beings, or is there any connection there as to who was using this technology?
It's possible that it was the same beings, because the descriptions he gave of the entities are very similar to what I have seen. But I find it very strange that that all of this technology is starting to come out in our own technology now. So stuff that Steve and I saw decades ago, and I'm talking about, for me, 30, 40 years ago, I was documenting technology that has only come out in the last, say, 10, 12, 15 years. And even then, it's only quite not as advanced in its usage and its structure. Much of the technology uses consciousness as well. This technology obviously doesn't, but we're talking about technology that's coming out in our own technology now that is so similar that it's unmistakable.
Was there any other technology that you've seen familiar to this? You don't have to really spell it out, but is there any other technology that you saw on board the ship that is now sort of public that wasn't public when you first saw it?
Yes, if I go right back into the 70s and 80s and early 90s, when I was seeing a 3D computer on a craft, I was seeing touch screens, flip screens, I was seeing a small tablet that could be rolled up. It was so thin and flexible, and even now we are trying to achieve that in our own technology. I've been keeping track of the news coming out on the internet about the future being in rollable technology that you can shove in your pocket, put in your bag, and that's what I was seeing back in the 80s and 90s. So I'll be going through quite a lot of this technology in my speech at the Congress. It'll be the first time that I've actually done a full speech with a lot of corroborative evidence in it from other experiencers.
Fascinating. It's a fascinating story. You're also coming out with a second book. Is this going to be in your second book?
Yes, there'll be quite a lot of new technology, and in fact there will be an advanced version of what I've just been talking about, of the technology that sees into the body. I'm not going to divulge that at the moment, but it's already in writing, it's documented, so it remains to be seen if that's the next step that takes place in our own technology. We're only just putting out the handheld version of something now, and we'll see what comes along. But hopefully my book will be out before then, so that it's well documented, because we seem to be keeping pace with this alien technology. We're lagging behind, but the ETs told me years ago that we're not actually that far behind. We need to just turn a corner and discover certain aspects of physics that we will then just take off right across the board, but particularly, I think, in our medical technology.
Well, I'd highly recommend people to get your first book. I've been through it a few times. And your second book, when is it expected out?
Probably in about 18 months' time. I've got quite a lot of speaking to do this year, so I'll have limited time to write, but I'm looking at about 18 months.